Thank you for joining us for the August edition of 3Squares. We are thrilled that you are here. I'm Charlie Arnott with Look East and the Center for Food Integrity, working to keep food trustworthy. And my two co-hosts, Kevin Ryan and Susan Schwally. Kevin, you'll go first because Susan's going to introduce our guest.
Awesome. Kevin Ryan with Malachite Strategy and Research, helping CPG, retailers, ingredient companies at the front end of innovation.
And I'm Susan Schwally with Circana, where we bring clarity to consumer behavior. Specifically, I work in the food and beverage area, but sometimes I get into a little general merch. And today, I'm really, really excited, Charlie and Kevin, because I have not only a colleague, but a dear friend of mine who is also from Circana. He and I have been rattling around the former NPD and IRI worlds for a couple decades. And Darren is a master of understanding what's going on, particularly in Americans' kitchens. He is the industry analyst for the CPG, food consumption, and food service industries at Circana. He spent 7 years at IRI before joining NPD, where we were reunited in 2007. He's a contributing author of our annual Eating Patterns in America report, which takes a look at what's going on across food service as well as what happens in the home. He provides insights based on our food-related research to organizations and companies across the country and has authored several reports, one of which just released within the last 48 hours, Inside America's Kitchens, which is why he's here with us today. Yeah, it's very exciting. Besides working on these studies, he's also a frequent speaker at industry events, hosted by associations and organizations, including the National Confectioner Association, the Food Institute, Grocery Shop, and he's been quoted in numerous media outlets, including NBC Nightly News, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and Darren, NPR is not on your bio, but I've heard you on that outlet also. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Listen, I've listened to your podcast before. You guys have such a chemistry. I'm just so happy to be here. This is cool.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. It's taken too long. So let's chat a little bit about what's going on in America's kitchens.
Yeah, let's do it.
I'm going to kick it off, Darren. Thrilled you are here. Thank you so much. And as a kitchen gadget fiend, I'm really interested in learning more about what you have to say. So what do you see as the biggest behavior change going on in America's kitchen pre-COVID today? I mean, that's a huge, broad space. But as you think about that with your expertise and experience, what's the biggest change you've seen?
Yeah. So I think we could probably sum that up in three areas. Certainly, the first one is the amount of meals that we're preparing in our homes. Clearly, that shot up at the very beginning of the pandemic because we couldn't go to restaurants, right? They were mostly closed. I was living in New York City during the pandemic. That was not fun. There were no restaurants available. We all had to stay in our tiny apartments and make food in our homes. But we're still doing that to the same degree, or maybe not the same degree, but we're doing it at an elevated rate compared to the pre-pandemic level. So before the pandemic, about 83% of our meals or so were made from the home. And now we're about 85, 86%. Just for context, in 2020, there was a brief period where it got up to about 90%. That's a very fast change for consumers because our eating patterns don't shift that greatly in that short period of a time. But we are still making more meals in the home, partly because we're not commuting. I'm still sitting in my home right now, so we're still doing all of that kind of stuff. I'd say the second part is the need for convenience across the entire path to consumption, what we've referred to. So that could be anywhere from just figuring out what you're going to make, how you're making it, clean up, that entire spectrum. Where we find meal ideas. Gen Zs, for example, I mean, they are at a life stage when they're not really sure what to do in the kitchen, but they really took to social media to figure out those ideas. Preparation, we got a lot of appliances to help us out with that. And also just in cleanup. So things where we could make meals that don't leave a big mess for us. And I would say the third is the level of indulgences we allow. So when the pandemic hit, I'm sure maybe you're going to raise your hands on this one. A lot of people ate a lot of ice cream and sweet baked goods at the beginning of the pandemic. We were stressed and we were bored. We had to do something, and a lot of people turned to baking or just eating sweet baked goods. A lot of that is still with us today. When you think about how we're still pretty stressed from other factors today, and we still see increased levels of sweet baked goods and just sweet treat consumption today. The name of the game, it's not about how much can you eat, it's how do you help me indulge without overdoing it. But there's still more indulgence going on today.
I'm
Great,
curious
thank you.
if you wouldn't mind digging a little bit more into that convenience part that you spoke of. I mean, I know at the beginning of the pandemic, everyone was like making sourdough, which doesn't sound very convenient. But then, it seems like, air fryers are still around and people seem to be using them. Even though Instant Pot filed for bankruptcy, I mean, convenience still seems to be with us. But is the idea behind convenience, is that changing today? And how do you see it kind of going forward?
Yeah, because when you think about it, in 2020, convenience was really all about how do you help me make this influx of meals in my home in the same amount of time that I have, right? We had a little bit more time on our hands because we weren't commuting so much. So for people who had an hour commute each way, that's 2 hours back in your day that you could now dedicate towards making those meals. You just had more meals to make in the home during that. Now, as people are starting to move out and about a bit more, whether it's for commuting, whether it's for just I'm going to meet friends, the role of convenience today is more about it kind of getting back to some of the traditional ways of how do you help me just make this meal faster? How do you help me make this meal with less of a mess? Because I don't have the time on my hands that I used to back in 2020.
Darren, one of the things that's interesting is we've seen again the contraction at dinner, the number of dishes being included and the number of ingredients. So, it's I think it's taking out the steps. I think it's more one dish meals, which also global cuisine and some of those trends lend themselves nicely to those types of meals. So we know the pantries are less stocked, right? And fewer ingredients are going into the dishes. So I think that's another shortcut.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You kind of hit on that. In the pandemic, we were stuffing our pantries deep because, well, we were afraid to go back to the grocery store, and we needed to stuff them for the long term almost. It's almost like it was a bomb shelter in many ways. But today we're having a little bit more of that just-in-time supply in our pantries. There's about a 10% reduction in the number of food and beverage items we keep on hand today versus 2020. And so we also have seen an increase in heat and eat solutions. We've seen an increase in, like you said, Susan, those one dish meals, which doesn't mean they aren't complex, but it just everything ends up in that one dish. And in many ways, that's the convenient factor. You're not cleaning up as many things.
Yeah. The other thing is, Darren, correct me if I'm wrong, because I know you look at this data more often than me, but on the sales side, the type of shopping trip that's up and growing are quick trips, which I think speaks to that just in time. Do I have that right?
Yep. And so those trips, like they sound like, you're really going for one or two items, maybe a handful of items. You're not doing that massive shopping trip, filling up the entire basket in those trips. And so, listen, I need some little bit of milk here. I need, maybe one thing that I need for dinner, but we're not stuffing the pantries deep the way we were.
Yeah.
Is that
I could
driven
take us down
by
a rabbit hole on that whole thing, Darren. We could go down declining volumes versus we're still eating the same, but we're not going to. So I'm going to rein myself in back to America's Kitchens. You can tell we love working together, right? So let's talk about Gen Z. You touched on the fact that, boy, they're coming of age. What's the front end of Gen Z now? 26? 26, 27?
Yeah, 26.
26. So think about, let's go back to 2008, 2009. The millennials were a similar age, starting to move out on their own, learn to cook, and they got hit with the Great Recession, and they didn't eat out as often, and they had to figure out how to cook. And lo and behold, Gen Z comes along, same point in that formation of kitchen skill and, how do I feed myself? And they hit this pandemic, and they have to learn to cook more. So how are they doing it? You touched on social media. And are their kitchens, do they look different? Do they have the avocado masher like millennials? Because I don't know if they're the avocado toast. Maybe they are. What's going on in their kitchens?
Well, the way I like to say it is that Gen Zs took a crash course in meal preparation during the pandemic. So it's an interesting analogy that you brought up with millennials back in 2008, 2009 with the Great Recession. Uh, in many ways, there were some similar things going on. The millennials, they couldn't really afford to go out to restaurants because of the economic situation. Gen Zs in this case, they probably were facing similar economic realities in 2020 that millennials did in 2008, but just the availability of restaurants wasn't there either. Whereas in 2008, restaurants were open. Millennials could go if they could afford it, but in 2020, many of them were just closed. And so, like I said, they took a crash course. They're at an adult life stage when they have very little cooking skills, and they couldn't rely on restaurants to fill up that gap. They took to social media to find ideas, and for lack of a better phrase, they dumbed them down to their skill sets. And we saw TikTok in particular as a clear winner for recipes with them. Social media is their top source, but TikTok in 2020, TikTok was it was only a top 10 source for Gen Zs. And I've gotten on it and I've looked at it, and I've actually gotten some recipe ideas from TikTok as well. But what I thought was fascinating about what they typically do is there's so many recipes ideas that there's no words to it, there's no measurements. They try to make it very easy for the consumer who really doesn't know what to do in the kitchen yet. So it doesn't have to be very prescriptive, and that opens the door to more people to do it regardless of their skill sets. And so, they really ramped up their skills. And when we look at how they rate themselves today versus 2020, we saw a big uptick in Gen Zs rating themselves as very good cooks and even accomplished cooks. So they're feeling much more confident in a short period of time.
So if you change the bar, you can achieve. Was that snarky of me? I guess the measurements changed, right? If they're getting it done in a way that they feel good about, I guess that tells us something insightful, right?
Yeah. It's, again, going back to the millennial Gen Z comparison, they both were forced to do something at an earlier life stage than they typically would have. So it's almost like there's a generational shift. When you and I were of this age, we didn't have these economic situations. We probably relied on restaurants a lot to fill that gap, and I know I did. And then over time, I just slowly started using my kitchen a bit more. These guys just went nose first. They just dove right into it. And so I could see them pushing this home-centric, the way that they're having their meals in the home earlier at a life stage. I see that happening as a kind of a generational shift.
Interesting. Kevin, I wonder, does the number of people calling themselves accomplished in the kitchen as a food scientist and a chef, does that make you grind your teeth?
No,
At all?
as
No?
long as as long as people are enjoying themselves and getting what they need done, I think as Darren was saying, I think that's great. I think that's great. I never want to shame folks for.
But do they know how to bind protein to microbeads in a clean room?
No, they do
Oh,
not.
there
They
you go.
probably don't.
It's
Yeah,
a whole other conversation.
That was
All
my
right.
background.
Back on track, Darren. If I had 100 feet of counter space, 80 feet would be filled with kitchen gadgets, right? So that's who I am. I have an Anova Smart sous vide oven like that, right? So how have smart appliances and other technology been adopted in the kitchen since then? Did we see a peak, and has it plateaued? Is it coming down? I mean, as Kevin mentioned, Instapot's filed for bankruptcy. So what is the status of all of that? We know that Gen Z and millennials love technology. They see technology as a means to an end. So what are we seeing with smart appliances?
Yeah, so it's not peaked. We are continuing to see more and more households say that they have smart appliances. And about 14% of meal preparers tell us that they have at least one in their kitchen. Compare that to 9% in 2020. So we're still moving up on this one. The thing about smart appliances is that most of them are really designed to be Bluetooth or Wi-Fi compatible to connect with your smartphones for controlling them.
Right.
And that's nice. It's a nice convenient. I'll tell you, I have a couple of them in my kitchen, and I could be sitting on the couch and I could say, hey, change the temperature to that, or put the timer on it and turn it off when the timer is done. What I think would really elevate smart appliances and push them further and create more demand for them is if they were actually solving things like a cooking pain point. So it could, for instance, if it could detect the size of your meat in the oven and adjust the temperature or whatever it is so that it comes out the same way and consistently all the time. That's the kind of pain points and needs that I think that these appliances could solve. Because to be honest, when I use my smart appliances, it's nice. I get an alert on my phone when my oven is preheated, but I could still do that by walking over and looking at it. It's not doing something necessarily new. And so I think that's the challenge for the appliance industry right now is not putting things that are like cool bells and whistles, but actually solving pain points.
So you're talking about inserting AI. We have to say the word AI because otherwise we don't get the metadata and tagging that really raises us in the ranks. But I mean that makes sense, right? I mean, some sort of AI.
Yeah.
AI. Did you say AI?
I'm not sure if it's AI. Yeah.
Just say it's AI.
Right.
Don't get me
exactly.
started on this one.
No. That's I completely agree. I'd like to go back to we already talked about I think TikTok and everything. I'd be curious to understand more about the idea of how the economy is affecting. You were talking about like the quick trips and all that kind of stuff. I'm curious about how much of that is driven by convenience and how much of that kind of thing or in general is driven by cost. I mean, how much is that really affecting consumers right now?
Well, when it comes to poor economic conditions and how we eat, we really don't stop eating because the economic times are bad. What we do is we make choices. So one of the things that we've seen in our data is an increase in share for things like value brands and private label. We've seen some channel shifting away from grocery to mass merchants. So consumers will try to find what they get all the time at a slightly lower price.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're not necessarily going to reduce the amount of times that we eat, and we are not seeing that happening right now, but we'll shift what we buy. We might also make fewer restaurant trips. We've seen households with kids, for example, they're not going to restaurants quite as much because that's a much bigger ring when you go out and feed all those mouths.
Right.
So that it won't necessarily change how much we eat, but it'll change where we eat and the things that we buy.
That makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And it goes back to that fewer dishes and making things that I think things like casseroles and center plate proteins and things have been doing well that you can get multiple eatings out of them. So yeah, we see shifts like broth is doing really well right now. So people are making things, with it.
Interesting.
Well, let's kind of bring it all in. I really want to switch gears. One of the things that we do at Circana is we track sales of kitchen gadgets, tabletop, small countertop appliances, and one of our counterparts in the home area works closely with Darren on this. And although most of this audience is probably on the food side all the way from ag front end supply through manufacturer, we may have some folks that are interested in how what the next hot air fryer is going to be or what the outlook is for appliances because we put food in it, right? So can you share with us just like an outlook of what's going on? What am I going to buy when I walk into Walmart next time off of the appliance section?
Yeah. Well, first thing, we do know that sales of kitchen appliances are a bit down versus last year and certainly versus 2020. We gravitated towards these appliances in 2020 because of all the influx of meals that we were handling in the home. We did it for the convenience factor of all of them. But when you think about just the natural purchase cycle of appliances, we definitely did a pull forward with this. We definitely disrupted those purchase cycles by buying all those appliances. And unlike food, which could last for weeks, maybe months, these appliances last for years. And so we kind of like squeezed a lot of I guess you could say, future sales into a couple of years. And so now we're kind of netting out and kind of returning to a normal growth pattern. But because we are still making more of these meals in our home, we are expecting that sales will remain elevated compared to the pre-pandemic over the next few years. All right, so there's that. So there's going to be a pent-up demand for that. What I think could help some of these manufacturers get back into that purchase cycle and get it kind of shortened again is, again, through innovation that solves for pain points. So very much like these smart appliances that we were talking about, like the ovens that could detect the size of the meat. Are there other countertop appliances that could do something similarly? So air fryers have been a big hit. We are seeing usage of air fryers increase at every single day part, but can they do something else too? Can they detect how much your item is being fried? I know there's several dishes I put in my air fryer that came out quite blackened. I didn't want it to go that far, but can they adjust that so that it now provides another layer of convenience and another a pain point solved by innovation? And so I think if we could do that, then we're going to start getting some of those purchase cycles a little bit shorter again.
You know, it's interesting,
cool.
Darren. I think there's two key trends that stand out for me, and correct me if I'm wrong, in sales of housewares that help us understand a little bit about consumption too. The first is I believe that stuff related to entertaining is still growing. Do I have that right? Like barware and because we bought a lot because of the pandemic, but then we're just naturally doing that more because we're not in restaurants. So I do think like special occasions and entertaining might still be an area. And then the other one that maybe you can also comment on is grills. We're seeing some softness in grilling, which I think is a lot weather related.
Yes, weather is certainly a part of it. We actually ask people open-endedly, what are you grilling less often today? And if yes, why? And weather was a big reason. It was hot this year. I mean, we all know it was a record heat across the country this year. And who wants to be standing next to an open flame when it's 110 degrees outside, like you're in
and
Phoenix?
You have air quality days, yeah.
You have air quality days, so smoke upon smoke. And so that definitely hindered that a bit too. But also there's a couple of other factors. When you think about what we consume during a grilling occasion, there's a lot of volume of food and beverages. It's not just about grilling the burger. You've got your potato salad, your coleslaw, your condiments, the bucket of beverages and cans, right, and on ice. So they're expensive. They feed a lot of people, but there's a lot going into that too. So so between weather, costs, and also these tend to take a little bit more time to make. And so when people are commuting again on weekdays, the grilling isn't quite as available. And so through June of this year, we have seen that the grilling occasions have decreased to a point that's lower than the pre-pandemic period.
Yeah, and I think we saw slowed purchase, but I could be wrong on that, but it seemed across the board in ownership, purchase, and usage.
Yeah,
so that's something for anybody related tied to those occasions to be aware of. That's my hot nugget.
But here's something though where we did see some growth in grilling is in pellet grills. So just kind of a different way. They're still small, so I don't want anyone to think that this is the hottest thing right now. But we are seeing that more people are using and purchasing pellet grills to kind of give that new flavor, new format. It's something new, and consumers love newness.
Yeah. One of the things about the heat wave that's helpful, a friend in Phoenix, he would just take a skirt steak on his way to work and lay it on the driveway. He'd come home at night, pick it up, dinner's ready. Right.
Sounds sanitary.
So convenient.
Pretty handy.
That is really convenient.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. So there's some upside to that as well. So
you don't even have to buy that driveway.
No, it's already there. So you just lay it out there, pick it up when you come back, and dinner's ready. So
get lots of extra minerals. Yeah,
it's great. It's great, right? You get your vitamin D, I'm sure, because it absorbs some sun during the day, and so it's
Charlie,
probably
you are a true
exactly how that works.
Yeah,
really good thing. So, all right, it's time to switch to our quiz.
Oh yeah,
and it's the August edition, and Susan hasn't won like in this millennia, but we'll go ahead and give her.
That's not true, but I let Charlie believe
pretty close. It's pretty close. We'll go ahead. We'll go ahead one more time and give her a shot. And Darren, you're more than.
Please.
We're happy to have you join.
Yeah.
All right.
And you can assuage Susan's unhappiness at the end.
All right. This month's is based on my interest in, I was doing a deep dive on fast food and fast food founders. So this whole quiz is about fast food and fast food founders. So first question, which of the following did Harlan Colonel Sanders, who was quite the character, which of the following did Harlan Colonel Sanders not do? So which one did he not do? Did he A, shoot a business rival in an argument about a gas station sign? B, practice law and serve as a justice of the peace? C, put a curse on a Japanese baseball team? Or D, carry the Olympic torch when it went through Georgia? Which of the following did he not
These
do?
are all really interesting.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with C, just because I think he's probably a little xenophobic and kept
All
his
right,
interest to
Japanese.
the US.
Okay.
Yeah.
Susan.
I'm going Olympic torch.
Okay, Olympic torch. Darren.
Is all the above an option?
One of them is not true.
Okay. So he did all of them except one.
Except one.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go with the Olympics too.
Okay. Susan and Darren are correct. The Olympic torch are, yes, he never did that.
I cannot see him running.
He did shoot a business rival over an argument because the original KFC was actually in his gas station. And so when they were doing that, and then he also was a justice of the peace and a lawyer, but he was fired from the law because he got in a fist fight. And he did put a curse on a Japanese baseball team because they took one of his Colonel Sanders statues and threw it in the river. And actually the Japanese baseball team actually found it in the river in 2007 and got it out to try to stop the curse, but that's a whole nother story. All right. So Darren and Susan.
Yeah.
All right. Question 2. Other than Harlan Sanders, what other fast food mogul was an honorary Kentucky colonel? Was it A, Ray Kroc of McDonald's, B, Dave Thomas of Wendy's, C, Glenn Bell of Taco Bell, or Dan Carney of Pizza Hut?
I'm going Dave Thomas because
I
he's
was
from
gonna say,
Ohio and that's near Kentucky.
Yeah, that was my
Okay.
thought process too. Yeah.
Charlie?
Just to be different, because we have to have different answers, I'm going to go with Ray Kroc, but I think it's probably Mr. Thomas.
It is Mr. Thomas. You could have gone for it. You could have.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Sure. Why not?
Yeah.
Yeah, because he began his career as the district manager for Kentucky Fried Chicken franchise. And
Oh,
actually,
very nice.
when Colonel Sanders died, Dave Thomas ordered all the flags at Wendy's to be flown at half staff because
Really?
that's how close he was to.
That's very
Colonel Sanders.
cool.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So far, Susan and Darren are
Cleaning my clock.
I know.
Yeah.
Okay,
Cleaning my clock.
Charlie.
Okay, this one. Burger King has been owned by several companies over the years. Which of the following brands were not under the same brand umbrella at Burger King at one time? Right? So which one was not connected with Burger King? All right. Was it A, Guinness Beer, B, Haagen-Dazs, C, MGM, the movie company, or D, Apple? Which one was not at one time under the same umbrella as Burger King?
Wow, I'm going to go with Apple just because it's so far out there. But
Apple.
All three of you, Apple. You are correct. At one time, Burger King was purchased by Pillsbury in 1967, which owned Haagen-Dazs, which was purchased by Grand Metropolitan in 1989, who owned Guinness, and then TPG Capital owned Burger King in 2002, and they bought MGM. So that is the correct. Very good. All right. Number 4, brothers Dan and Frank Carney owned Pizza Hut in 1958. But in the 1980s, Frank left Pizza Hut and became a franchisee in what other fast food company? All right. Was it A, Papa John's, B, Subway, C, Chick-fil-A, or D, Arby's?
I'm going to go Subway.
Wait. Susan?
Arby's.
Arby's?
What were the other two?
The other two left were Papa John and Chick-fil-A.
Arby's.
It was Papa John's.
Oh,
He actually went into pizza.
Went into
Frank
pizza. We
became
should
a
have just said that.
franchisee.
Yeah.
He became a franchisee of Papa John's in 1994, and by 2001, he owned 133 locations.
No
He
way.
actually did a commercial saying, "I've switched over, and this is better pizza."
Oh.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
That's a fun
that might be a
family
stretch.
reunion.
I know exactly.
I
Last
think that's the
question.
last question.
They-
and I'm
Last
not-
question.
I can't catch up. I can't catch
I don't
up.
think so, but
yeah.
Charlie,
you can
all that
you
smack
get close.
talking.
Tell me
Before
I've frozen
owning
over.
before owning Chick-fil-A, founder S. Truett Cathy started what other fast food chain? Okay, it's an obscure fast food chain, but which one did he found? Was it A, Spangles, B, Made Right, C, the Dwarf House, or D, Wife Saver?
I'm gonna
Made-
say
made
Wife
right.
Saver just because that name's great. Wife
Okay.
Saver.
Wife Saver. Darren
I'm
Made
goes
going
right.
with wife.
Spangles.
Spangles. Susan, Charlie.
Made right. Made right. Made right.
Made Right. You're all wrong. It was the Dwarf House.
The Dwarf House.
He
I should have known
opened-
that. I've been there. I've seen the whole story. I should have remembered the Dwarf House, but I didn't realize it was a franchise.
Yes, he opened Dwarf House in 1946 in Hapeville, Georgia. Ironically, the Dwarf House, it focuses on hamburgers and steaks, and there's still 12 Dwarf Houses around. Spangles is a Kansas burger place that's known for their Black Angus burger. Made Right is an institution in Iowa, which you probably know. It's a loose meat sandwiches.
Yeah.
And then
Which
Wife
is a gross
Saver.
concept, but that's
Yeah,
okay.
Wife Saver is a very specific. It's a chain, but it's known from. It's in Augusta, Georgia, and they're the restaurant that supplies all the pimento cheese for Augusta National.
Ooh.
Oh,
There you go. There
Yes.
you go.
Life Saver.
Wife Saver. Yes.
Well, hell has in fact frozen over.
you know what? 'Cause
Susan-
she brought the
Susan-
Circana team.
He did. The
I did.
Circana team. Team Circana. I'm not worthy.
Team
I'm not
Circana.
worthy.
Yeah,
Team
yeah, yeah,
Circana
yeah.
rules today. So, well, we
So-
need
so
to break in the
what-
heat.
What do
So
we
that's good.
win?
You win
Pride.
our undying love
Pride.
and respect.
Pride.
Pride, not prize. Pride,
it.
not prize.
Right.
Pride.
Right.
Darren, thank
you
you
and I
so
are going
much
to
for
update our
joining
LinkedIn
us.
right now and say
You
we won.
should. You won the
Say-
quiz. You won
Champions
the
of the 3Squares quiz. Yes.
That's
right.
That's a skill on
Congratulations.
LinkedIn, isn't it?
quiz.
I think it is.
Yeah.
It should
Good
be.
choice.
All right. Well, Darren, thank you. And thanks to all of you for listening to the August edition of 3Squares. We are thrilled that you chose to spend a little time with us. We encourage you to do so again in September. We will be back with another outstanding guest and, of course, co-hosts Susan Schwally and Kevin Ryan. I'm Charlie Arnott. We want to thank you for your time and attention. Have a great rest of your August, and we will see you next month. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.